Welcome to Trash Talk, a podcast by Zero Waste Canada. I'm your host, Alistair McCallum. I moved to Canada in 2017 from England, and I've since held a variety of roles in the waste industry, and currently sit on the Zero Waste Canada board. On this podcast, we will dive deep into the world of zero waste and the circular economy, speaking with change makers who are helping to lead us to a more waste-free, sustainable planet. All right, Trash Talk is back again. We're joined by Sue Maxwell. Welcome, Sue.
Thanks, Alistair. Lovely to be here.
So let's start off with your background in waste. Tell us about yourself and your kind of history in the industry.
Sure. It's a little bit convoluted. I actually spent 10 years as a dietitian working in healthcare, but decided to go back to school and did a master's in environment and management at Royal Roads. And one of the students in a higher year worked for the Fraser Valley Regional District and wanted somebody to do a deeper dive on zero waste. And I started looking into it and it sounded really interesting. So that was my thesis topic. And then one of my classmates worked for Vancouver Coastal Health and in the environmental management department. And he said, "Oh, we need somebody who understands sustainability and healthcare." So that's kind of how I got started. Yeah, started consultancy working on mainly zero waste, but also extended producer responsibility programs, sustainability, things like that. And my predecessor at Vancouver Coastal Health had been on the board of the Recycling Council of BC. So I thought, oh, that must
Hmm.
be what you do when you're in this position. So I joined the board. And then since then, I have almost 18 years of consulting experience, but also have been on advisory committees, boards. I spent a term on our council in our local government. And of course, I've been doing litter cleanups and just picking up trash and seeing what things look like for yeah, a couple of decades now.
Awesome. Yeah, kind of similar things to myself, and they're like, picking up trash and walking around bins. So yeah, all the fun stuff and the like on the ground, I guess is what you call it, work as well. So yeah, awesome. Thanks for sharing. And then tell us about founding Zero Waste BC or how it kind of came about and your involvement in that.
Sure. So it came about in 2008 because Metro Vancouver was updating their solid waste management plan. And at first, they said it's going to be a zero waste focused plan, and we were all very excited. And then it started to look like their vision of zero waste included building up to 6 new incinerators. And so we thought, oh, we need an organization to show what zero waste really is, make sure the definition wasn't getting changed to be some sort of industry friendly definition, and also to make sure that we were trying to get really good systems here in BC. So it was an informal group at 2008. During the pandemic, there was a bit more time, so we formalized as a society in 2020. And our mission really is working to drive systemic change towards zero waste in BC. And we've had a really great group of volunteers plus board members. I know that you have been on our board in the past, and that's really helped us to grow as an organization.
Yeah, I think I had 2 years on the board, so a great learning time for myself, and learned from the best in you and the board members there. So yeah, thankful I was brought on, and it was a great learning time for myself, and I've taken my learnings into work, and still supporting zero waste obviously daily. So yeah, thanks for having me. Tell us about some of the kind of key things in BC that you mentioned incineration just now. So that's been a hot topic recently. So can you tell us more about what the issue is and kind of broadly why is incineration and burning waste a bad thing?
Oh, so many
Yeah.
aspects of that. It's definitely a hot issue here in BC right now. There's only one incinerator in BC, and that's owned by Metro Vancouver, and they are updating their solid waste management plan again right now. Sadly, they do not seem to want to phase out their incinerator, even though the operating costs for it are going up by 4 times by 2030. So instead of costing 10 or $11 million a year, it's going to cost $40 million a year. Plus, they have forecast over $400 million of capital costs that'll be needed because they're not even meeting the guidelines that the province set in 2011. And they have been asking for exemptions or uh, alternate ways of measuring things. And so not only is incineration very polluting from a greenhouse gas perspective, it puts out more greenhouse gases per unit of energy than coal or natural gas. And also, it puts out more greenhouse gases than if you took the waste to landfilling. So it's not a good energy option. It's not a good disposal option. It's also because it's so expensive, it means that people, organizations like local governments are spending all their money on really expensive disposal things like incineration rather than actually trying to reduce the waste. And so when we've done analysis, we did a case study on Metro Vancouver's incinerator. We found that they could be saving money and also reducing waste if they didn't spend all that money on the incinerator, but also that you could be building really good systems, building community, helping to be more resilient to supply chain disruptions, and then avoiding all of the upstream impacts that happens when we consume materials, like a single-use cup or a straw or a bag or something for a few seconds. We sometimes forget that there's a whole lot of upstream impacts that it took to create the oil and gas that made the plastic, or whether it's paper, the forests that were being clear cut. We need to start thinking about that and the communities that it impacted, as well as all the other species. So, incineration is also a risk to the neighbors. We were approached by a person who owns a warehouse near the incinerator, and he had been doing testing on the rooftop and finding a lot of this weird ash that he had to clean up. And the testing showed that it was quite high in dioxins. So, and that mirrors what we're seeing in the EU. There's a group called Toxico Watch that's been doing testing around the incinerators, many of them far newer than the Metro Van one. The Metro Van one is past its normal lifespan. And when they've been doing that testing in Europe, even though the facilities might meet the testing requirements, um, what they're finding is that actually dioxins and other toxins are coming from the incinerators at a level that is concerning. And so that's why in Paris, when they did the testing, Paris health authorities did kind of redid the testing to check and then recommended that people don't eat their backyard chicken eggs. So when you have weak testing regimes, it allows more pollution to get out than you think. And that's why in Oregon, they did similar kinds of testing. The University of Oregon was taking a look, I think, at pine needles or moss around the incinerator. And then when the requirements for testing and standards for the one incinerator they had left were changed, then that incinerator closed. So I'm hoping if anybody's listening to the podcast, because it's always being marketed as, oh, look, there's this magic box and you can sell you're going to get energy from it and it's not going to pollute and it's going to be very low cost and you might be able to sell the outputs. Don't believe the hype. Really do research because this has been proved false in numerous locations.
Yeah, lots to pick out there. I want to just start with the toxic kind of like fumes and like, issues arising from this because it's the same where I am on the eastern side of Canada in terms of the region of Peel. I know put a report out that said, hey, like burning waste is bad. It causes toxic ash. It pollutes the air. But then they're still moving ahead, from what I understand, with incineration in the region of Peel. So I'm not really sure, how you can ignore that kind of, facts. It's not good for health. It's going to harm human health, and the benefits kind of don't really exist from that standpoint. What's more important than healthy communities? So I'm surprised that's not talked about more. And then City of Toronto, I know, put a survey out that said, hey, look at all these great things waste energy can do. It can create power, it can do all these wonderful things, but just don't look at the health impact. Just look at, hey, we're going to save landfill space. We're going to provide you all this power to heat your homes and everything. Just don't look at these negative things. Just fill the survey out and just ignore the bad elements that aren't part of this survey. So anyway, that framing has been interesting to observe over here as well because there's meaningful impacts to people that are kind of skirted around and not brought to the
Yeah,
forefront when they should be.
it really comes from, I think, Historically, when we were doing waste planning back in the day, it was seen as an engineering problem. So it was like, oh, we have all these materials that nobody wants. What are we going to do with it? And so we engineered a solution. And those started as landfills. There were incinerators sometimes back in the day as well, but often they were closed down because they were very polluting and the neighbors
Mm,
generally didn't want them. But that has led us to a system where it's really like, oh, it's seen as an engineering problem, and thus we need to ask engineers what the solutions are, and the solutions are often engineered solutions. But now that we are really starting to recognize through climate change, but also loss of biodiversity, um, loss of soil nutrients. There's some farmers or agricultural specialists talking about like how many crops do we have left. Now that we're starting to see that we are, especially with this population level, we're on a finite planet. We're trying to provide resources and materials for all of these people, but we can't do it in a way if we're going to be as wasteful as we are with the materials. So now we need to start moving beyond is an engineered solution and start looking at prevention of waste in the first place. And those things are going to be a lot more policy tools. They might
mm.
not be at the local government level. We're going to need provinces, territories, the federal government, and also international cooperation in order to start shifting the way that we do things and the way that we value materials. And so I think if we can shift there, we do see some local governments that are starting to see circular economy and zero waste as opportunities, and they're getting not just their solid waste departments involved, but they are getting their communications and education department going, and they're also including economic development people because sometimes people are viewing it as an opportunity to um, not only use materials more wisely, but also provide local jobs and local business opportunities to be able to, for example, repair things, or now you're having reusable cups and reusable plates and things like that. So you need wash stations. And so it's also a good way to start localizing your economy as well.
Yeah, lots of good points. And I think that kind of loops back to what you mentioned before about looking at the cost of incineration in BC and your own study in terms of the cost effectiveness of zero waste is actually better. So could you explain more about the cost side of things? So in terms of zero waste, why is it more cost effective to pursue that pathway versus burning waste?
So, I mean, with almost anything, prevention is going to be far more cost effective than it is to deal with something at the end.
Yeah.
Um, when we took a look, and granted, we've been trying for over a year to try to get uh, really clear numbers from Metro Vancouver. We are able to see what their publicly available budgets are, but they've been putting out some other numbers that when we tried to file a Freedom of Information request, they're like, that will be $170,000 to know these answers. And so, but when we did do our case study, we looked and it's like even a generous estimate of the budget line items that could be focused on zero waste. We thought it was around $4 million a year. And then we compared that to what they were spending on incineration as well as landfilling. And that's where, zero waste actions were far, far cheaper. Now, zero waste is also not something you do alone. So, yes, you can, as a local government, you can offer services to make sure you're getting, organics collected, recycling picked up. You can also support things like repair cafes. You can also, there's a huge opportunity with procurement because the spend from local governments is quite high, which means if you start to tell the people you want to buy services and products from that you want things in a certain way or that you don't want things that produce a lot of waste, you can really start to shift the market.
Mm.
But anyway, we took a look at the budget line items that might possibly be related to that. And yeah, like the difference in the costs were clear, and we know that there were some municipal partners that were also rolling out organics collection at this time. So it's not only we don't have visibility into the costs of what these partners were doing, but that really shows that once you start to work together and set a clear target and where you want to go, you will bring people along. And a lot of municipalities within the Metro Vancouver region are already working towards zero waste. And so they want a supportive regional government to be working in the same direction as them, not kind of working against them.
So with all that said, it's great data and great insights. Why do you think that zero waste pathway isn't higher on the list?
Well, I think one is a lack of ambition. So, I think if you're like, oh, everything's just going along fine, the province has set a bolder target than, 350 kilograms per person of waste, which Metro Vancouver isn't meeting, but there's no penalties to not meeting that.
Hmm.
Um, Metro Vancouver is supposed to do a solid waste management plan every 10 years. The last one was approved in 2011. And at that time, it was meant to be a 5-year plan. But so say, okay, by 2021, they should have had a new plan. They've spent almost, they will have spent about 5 years on the planning process by the time they have a new one. And there's been no consequences for this lack of doing that either. I think also in Canada in general, although we complained about disposal costs, disposal is relatively inexpensive. So compared to other issues that a local government might be facing, it's not going to spring to the top until there's a crisis. And so that's generally when you start to see people trying to sell incineration will pop up as soon as your local government is in the news for having something about a landfill getting close to filling. Then poof, you're going to get a bunch of marketing to your elected officials. Elected officials, granted, nobody gets elected for their thorough knowledge of solid waste. They're there because they want to do a good job for their community. But if all they're hearing from is all these waste proponents, waste to energy proponents, then that is a problem. And then also, if the staff that are managing things are always just the engineers and not these broader suite, like having it be a all of government approach, then you are also going to get, it's kind of like they say, if you're going to just see a surgeon, then you're probably going to get recommended surgery. But
Hmm.
if we want other answers, then we need to start including other people in the solutions as well.
Yeah, good answer. Yeah, what I'm taking away there is I should run for government in the future.
It
But
is a really good experience, and it's like going to university again. You'll learn so much. You'll meet lovely people from your community who care about all different things. I highly recommend it.
yeah, it's food for thought in a few years maybe. But yeah, no, but good points in terms of hearing different voices, and like you mentioned on the earlier on, is that it's not maybe a priority of government until it is, right? So yeah, good takeaways there, I think. You mentioned planning as well earlier on too. So in terms of what's next for solid waste in the Vancouver region, so what's currently going on? When is the new plan coming out? There's, I think, a comment process right now. So yeah, give us the latest on what's next for the region.
Sure. Well, as I mentioned, it's been taking many, many years. There's several of us, people who really care about zero waste on the Public Technical Advisory Committee. That's a committee of Metro Vancouver. There's also an industry advisory committee, and these committees, as well as the public and numerous other entities, have been providing feedback all the way along. Sadly, a lot of the feedback is not reflected in the draft plan. So the draft plan is out right now, and everybody should be commenting on that until February 20th, including the public. So Friday, February 20th is the last day for feedback, and then it will ideally get modified before it would go for approval at the Zero Waste Committee and then by the board. And when I say modified, it's because the last plan was focused on zero waste. This plan does not mention the word zero waste a single time.
Mm,
There's targets that are not within the time frame of the plan. So the targets are for 2040 and 2050, and that's not even in the next 10 years. The targets are weaker than the last plan. And there's most plans would have in the planning process done a thorough analysis of like what assets do we have? How long are they going to last? What amount of capital is it going to take to keep them going? And there should have been a question, do we want to keep the incinerator or not? And if we do or do not, what does that cost us? What is the risk? What are our alternatives? None of that was done, which means there's a whole lot of nice actions. The actions generally tend to be test, try, pilot, encourage, which you do need to do at the beginning. But for a 10-year plan, you need to eventually move to and implement and
mm.
enforce, and roll out policy. And so the plan is very weak in that regard. And also, unlike most plans, there's no budget for any of the actions that they're going to do, and there's no timeline for like, oh, these actions will happen in year one and these actions will happen in year two. So we're really hoping that people will send their feedback in saying that they want like a real plan and a plan that focuses on zero waste and ideally phases out the incinerator. Um, and then once all those processes happen, they'll have to send it to the province, and then the province gets to, it's a province's mandate to approve a plan or not. And so we're also hoping, because the province does have these stronger targets, that the province will make sure that local governments don't just get to sit on their hands for, an extra 7 years, and that they do need to actually have strong plans that they intend to have meaningful action with.
I thought things were bad for zero waste out here, but it seems like BC there's some issues too. Oh no, okay. Yeah, good overview there. Hopefully people can comment on the plan and yeah, and get zero waste more in the minds of the region. So hopefully there's some good news on that front, but doesn't sound too promising right now. But let's pivot to some actual good news, and that's the plastic. So there was a recent court victory about plastics being toxic. So could you give us a kind of rundown of what that means, how it's impacting BC policy, and possible next steps on that front?
Yeah, I mean, we were super excited when we heard everything's been kind of a bit on, not exactly pause, but kind of pause at the federal level, waiting for this, because the federal government, along with provinces and territories, have a zero plastic waste strategy, and they have been consulting on things and then implementing them. And the one that most people probably would have seen would be those bans on certain single-use plastic items. But there's other ones that are meant to come, like in terms of having clearer labeling, so that if something says recyclable on it, you really can recycle it in your region, and making sure that, the recycling material perhaps are going back into recycled content in new items, along with a host of other actions that they have intended. So I think this is great because it means that it kind of gives the green light to the federal government to keep working on that and hopefully expanding the work that they've been doing. At the BC level, I think the BC government took uh, a cautious approach in that they're like, well, if the court case goes the wrong way for us, that means that we wouldn't have any bans at all because they were intending to pursue bans. So they did go ahead and make their own bans that are very similar to the federal ones. And then that way, if something went wrong, we would still have the bag bans here in BC. I think what that can mean for BC, though, is that hopefully the BC government will also feel emboldened to start adding in the additional materials and taking a stronger stance on other kinds of plastics, including we have an extended producer responsibility law that covers packaging, and it's covered packaging and printed paper since 2014. I know you guys are going through some changes in Toronto or Ontario at the moment around that, but we've had ours for over a decade now, but
Mm.
it doesn't cover the institutional, commercial, and industrial sector, which means when organizations do waste audits, there's still a lot of paper and cardboard and plastic of all kinds in the waste streams. And so that's where our provincial government did do an investigation, sort of had a discussion paper on what should we do about this materials that are coming out of the institutional, commercial, and industrial sector. And now I'm hoping that they will take the next steps because there was a lot of ideas around what could be done around that. And so now it's the time to, I think, release an intentions paper about what is the government thinking that they will do, and then give people an opportunity to provide feedback on that.
Yeah, I think clarity is the important thing, like you were saying, and having that kind of federal strategy, and then hopefully the provinces take it up upon themselves to do more too. So, yeah, it is some good news at last. So, hopefully, we see some action as a result of this that's not currently in place, but hopefully, there's more coming. So, awesome. So, closing off. Zero Waste BC is doing some great work you mentioned before. So how can people, get involved or support your mission?
Sure. I mean, if people are interested, they can follow us on LinkedIn. That's one of the communications tools that we use if there's a consultation that is out. So in the past, the federal government's had consultation on, single-use plastic bans, right to repair, um, the labeling laws, and those sorts of things. And also here in BC, there's often extended producer responsibility programs that are renewing their plans. So there's been a lot of opportunities for consultation. And so when we know about one of those, we'll post it on there. There's also an opportunity to sign up for our newsletter, which is on our webpage, or they can request to join our listserv. And there might be additional volunteer opportunities if you're really keen. And finally, we always appreciate donations as well. We're a nonprofit and run by volunteers. And so donations can also be at our website, which is zerowastebc.ca.
Amazing. Yeah, thanks for your time today, Sue. And yeah, everyone listening, yeah, please do get involved.
Great. Thank you so much, Alistair.